The TV series The Walking Dead was a really big hit in the 2010s. I myself was a huge fan of this series. I admired their group of survivors and how they developed throughout the seasons. But after some seasons had passed, this series turned out to be an emotional drama instead of a show about survivors trying their best to live through an apocalypse plaguing this world. And I learned that this series I once liked so much was getting worse. But this wasn't the only kind of media called The Walking Dead. It was actually based on a comic book series written by Robert Kirkman. And when I started reading it, I found out that this comic was something else. Something much greater. The Walking Dead is a series about the sheriff Rick Grimes struggling to survive with his group in a zombie-infested world. And the only rule in this world is to not get bitten by the zombies. For if you do get bit, you will turn into an undead zombie yourself. The first comic book issue of The Walking Dead was released in 2003, and when I first read it, it turned out to be something much deeper and interesting than the TV series The Walking Dead was famous for. The early part of the series is really similar to that of the TV series. They feature almost everyone from the main cast, but many events that happen throughout the series change from the comic to the TV show. And some of these events is what I would like to enlighten you about. Just to make sure, I will spoil pretty heavily in this video, so you have been warned. Now that that's been said, let's start. If we compare the comic volumes to the TV show seasons, it will look somewhat like this. Volume 1 till 8 equals Season 1 through 3.5 of Season 4. Volume 9 till 17 equals the rest of Season 4 to Season 7. The last 17 volumes of the series is the end of the comic. And now that the TV series 10th season is teasing us about the Commonwealth, who shows up in volume 30, we can presume that season 11 will be its final season. At least I hope. So, to give you some examples on how different some characters are from the comics, let me ask you 3 simple questions. The first one. Do you even remember Dale? This old man was a pretty cool guy in the TV series, but he's nothing compared to himself from the comics, where he slowly turns insane, has sex with 30-year younger girls, and lives all the way to volume 11. Compared to the TV series, he's a nice old guy that dies in the second season. This character got a whole new attitude and style. Something that really could have been handled better in the TV version, if you ask me. Second question. How cool was Andrea? Andrea is one of the most badass characters from the comics, surviving all the way to volume 28, being the crew's main sniper and having her own guard tower in Alexandria. In the TV series, Andrea dies in season 3. The potential in Andrea's character is thrown away, making her a lame version of the badass Andrea we get to know in the comics. And now to the last question. How old is Judith again? Judith is the baby of Lori Grimes, and born into the apocalyptic world, she still manages to live in the TV show. While that's the case here, she actually is shot with Lori at the escape from the prison when Governor attacks, something that puts a heavier burden on Rick's character, making him tougher in the comics. As you see, the comics take better care of their characters than those in the TV show. The ones from the show seem boring and unusable, while the ones from the comics is badass, scarred by what they have been through, but still manages to press further. One of my favorite arcs from the comics is the Hunters arc, or if you're familiar with the TV series, it's called Terminus arc. In the TV series, Rick's group get captured by the Terminus after they lure them in, giving them false information about how safe the place is. After they capture Rick's group, they reveal themselves to be cannibals, eating those who approach them, and that's how they survive. These guys are easily forgettable in the TV series, and that's an even bigger disappointment when they have so much hype built up to them. Now let me tell you about the Hunters from the comics, arguably one of the best arcs in this series. After a sadistic man called Governor chased Rick and his group away from a prison they've been living in, they find themselves on the road once again, without a place to stay. While out in the wilderness, struggling to find a place to stay for, they are being followed by people in the woods. These are the Hunters. They do not have any kind of backstory or motivation other than eating humans to survive themselves, and that makes them even more frightening. They are unethical, evil, driven by their instincts and zero emotions, something even Rick has experienced when he was at his worst. They take the character I previously mentioned, Dale, captive, and after the Hunters feast on Dale's leg, Dale informs them that he is bitten by a zombie, making him infested and his leg tainted. The Hunters takes him to a church where Rick's group has found shelter for a while and place him there as bait. Dale's bit eventually kills him, but at least he passes away surrounded by Rick and the group. After Rick tracks down the Hunters to have a talk with them, a few teammates hides nearby, ready to aim at the Hunters and shoot them if something goes wrong. And in this scene, you see Rick's madness and anger completely control him, as he slaughters the Hunters brutally to make them pay for eating Dale's leg. And Rick's teammates join him without hesitation. This part of the comics is a perfect representation of what happens to people in an apocalypse. After seeing enough sick and inhumane events, you finally find yourself committing them too. And in this moment, Rick is not a hero anymore. A hero would turn his back to his enemies, or at least get rid of them quickly. But Rick wants to finish them off as brutal as possible, giving us these horrible pages showing Rick regret nothing. And that is why Rick is more like a villain than a hero in this arc. This arc is just so extremely well executed. And in the TV show, the guy getting eaten by the Hunters is one we met for the first time in the previous season, and not a long-term teammate, making the scene more ridiculous and not as deep as it was in the comics. And it's moments like these that make the comic worth reading, and seeing them adapted in a bad way is just sad and frustrating. There are moments where the TV show almost nails the moments from the comics, and that is the introduction of Negan. When Negan was introduced, I had already lost my interest for the show after going through hours of meaningless dialogue just to drag out the episodes. If the TV series copied the comics, I think it would turn out to be an even better show than it was. So if you're planning to watch the show, I would suggest you read the comics first. The comics of The Walking Dead really put some light to the more psychological problems in an apocalyptic world as well as the horror of it. This example with Rick is not the only one, but I feel it's the best one out of the many events I could talk about. In the comics, you experience people committing suicide out of pure depression from living in this hell. You experience children killing each other in the hope of them reanimating to zombies without understanding the consequence of what they did. And all of these horrible moments help create a world that makes you invested. Its realism makes you lust for more. They always manage to keep you occupied without anything feeling forced or unnecessary. But as the comic progressed, it slowly turned worse and worse. and after volume 21, the downfall of The Walking Dead was set in motion, ending the whole series with the last enemy being the fucking class system. With horribly written social justice characters and a new society without any soul or real meaning, the series killed itself. But I want you to look back at the time The Walking Dead was great, even before the TV series. I want you to look at all the characters and how they should have been. I want you to be able to enjoy the comics and see what an apocalyptic series should be.